Welcome into another edition of Sports Night. Bailey Burmaster alongside Lee Smith, and we have some topics to talk about. Monday Night Football was a doozy of a game.
Oh, God.
It was super ugly.
We had two games.
We did have two games because we had Saints and Panthers too. I think all eyes were on the Steelers-Browns game, especially after early in the game. Horrific news concerning running back Nick Chubb. He got hit by Minkah Fitzpatrick, low angle, right into the knee, and immediately grabbing his knee, not getting up, had to be carted off. Very, very bad news. Immediately knew he was not coming back in the game. And Kevin Stefanski, the head coach, said in postgame that there are multiple tears along with a dislocated knee, and he is out for the season. He will have surgery. Lee, what are your initial thoughts?
It's always when you lose your best player on your team, and especially game two. God, that's such a blow, and for that team too, that city.
Well, I think what was crazy too about it is you saw how much Nick Chubb is respected for not only just who he is as a human being, but as a football player, because he's just one of those guys who doesn't say too much, is about his business, is about his work, and he's one of the best running backs in the league. You saw both teams go down on a knee to respect him while he was down, and then the fans, even Steeler fans, were cheering for him as he was carted off. I mean, everyone was tweeting about Nick Chubb and sending him thoughts and prayers because it did not look good. I don't know if you saw that. The broadcast did not show the replay, but of course, like social media does, it ended up on social media, and it was gruesome.
Yeah, and you know, he's one of the only true bell cow 3-down backs still left in the game. Mm-hmm. So it's rough for Cleveland, but man, you got to feel it for that guy, especially being a former Dog. I mean, we got a lot of viewers here that obviously keep up with his career, but man, that's tough all around.
I think what's really concerning, if you haven't followed the Browns for a few years as well, is Nick Chubb is not only one of probably the most respected and liked Browns players of possibly all time, but what he means to that offense is massive. He's carried that team when they've gone through different quarterbacks and different struggles offensively. Yeah. And bringing in Deshaun Watson into the mix, even the first 2 weeks, he has not looked good.
He's pretty bad.
He's been correct. And Nick Chubb has had to carry the burden of the offense, and now your best offensive player is no longer going to be a part of your offensive scheme.
Yeah.
And Jerome Ford, his backup, who's now running the first team running back, he did not play well week one. Now, he did good stepping up for Chubb last night. Yeah. But there's a lot of circulation of, will the Browns go find someone else? Will they bring back Kareem Hunt? Because it used to be the 1-2 punch of Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb.
So where's he at right now?
Who? Kareem Hunt?
Kareem, yeah.
I don't know if he's necessarily on a team.
I thought he was. But, I mean, that just talks about how crazy it can be. I mean, you've got to have depth everywhere, especially running back.
Yeah, I'm sure he's still a free agent.
Really?
And it says, report, Browns are exploring Cam Akers and Kareem Hunt to replace Nick Chubb.
Okay.
But I'm curious if he would come back, because there was a point where he was holding out of training camp last year to try and get a new contract, and the Browns wouldn't give it to him. And it kind of made sense because they picked up Jerome Ford and were unsure. But now, if you're Kevin Stefanski, if you're a Browns fan even, you are just in a world of hurt. And Myles Garrett even said it really, really stunk. I mean, he said it in other words that I can't say on broadcast.
Imagine that.
But I think everyone in that game was in complete and utter shock when Chubb went down.
Oh, not good. Not good for the game.
Something that was a positive, the Falcons with a comeback win over the Packers. How shocked were you by this game?
A little bit, honestly. So I caught like the fourth quarter. Uh-huh. When they got down on that last drive, I was like, there's no way Young Ho Koo misses another kick. There's no way, right?
Yeah.
And thank goodness it went through the uprights.
Yeah, Young Wei was clutch there. But also, here's something that I can't remember. I think it was Jesse Bates who said it in the locker room following the game. Because there was a point where you're going into the fourth quarter and you're like, they're not going to pull this out. They don't have the guts to pull this out. They're still young. They're still trying to find their identity. The fact they were able to not just roll over to the Packers, whose offense was firing pretty much on all cylinders under Jordan Love at that point. To not just roll over and give into this game, I thought spoke volumes. That's a team that is progressing. That is a team that is continuing in the right direction. And that was a huge win. I mean, I don't think the Packers are historically as good as they've been over the last couple of years, but they have a good defense.
Yeah.
They have Rashawn Gary. They have Kenny Clark. They have guys with Jair Alexander. And, I mean, there are some things to improve upon. I think Ritter definitely needs to see the field a lot better. He should have had 2 or 3 more picks. I think Jair Alexander actually barely missed one, and that happened a couple times. That has to be cleaned up. But I mean, I think the reality is this team is surprising people.
Let's see. The Packers leading 24-12 at one point in the second half, and the Falcons come back.
The Falcons had the opportunity to come out of the half and double down after they had scored that touchdown to bring it within, and they went 3 and out, and then the Packers scored, and you're going, oh, this is about to get away from them, and it kind of looks that way until they're able to go down. And you know what I love is I worked in Green Bay at one point, and I was talking to a lot of the writers that were in town, and all of them after the game had 2 things they wanted to say. A lot of them said Desmond Ritter is not good.
Yeah.
Which I would argue in the first 2 games it has not been good. He gave himself a C after his performance against the Packers, and I thought that was a little gracious. C- is probably what I would have given him. But 2, everyone is awestruck by Bijan and how good he looks.
Yeah.
And I think people are finally understanding maybe what we've been seeing throughout camp.
Well, and if you're going to have quarterback play like that, a running back is off as basically supposedly a generational talent. We're seeing that he can possibly be that. You're going to have that if you're not going to stretch the field with a quarterback. Mm-hmm. You have Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Mac Hollins, and you don't throw the ball down the field. I can't. I mean, I know he's trying to be conservative with the ball. He doesn't want to turn anything over. But at some point, you got to have some kind of throw down the field to stretch a defense.
You do.
Could you imagine what Bijan could do if they didn't have the box loaded every time?
Yep. And I think that is where we will see as we get further into the season how that progresses and how if Ritter can really air it out. It was really nice to see Drake London back involved a bit. Yeah. And even Matt Collins had some big plays. So would have had bigger plays had he kept his heels off the line there. But I think I'm with you in the sense that I think this Falcons team has been pretty surprising. I think they're up for a tall task in their first away game against the Lions this week. The Lions are just a completely revamped team under Dan Campbell.
They got some injuries, though, so the Falcons are hitting them at the right time.
Correct. It's not who you play, it's when you play them.
Yep.
All right, let's move gears to baseball a bit. The Braves have lost their 4th straight game. They opened up with the Phillies last night at Truist Park. What is your takeaway from this as they clinched the division and they're not looking as good as they did once they clinched the division?
I mean, I don't really know. I mean, it's not good, but it's also not the end of the world because it's not the playoffs yet. But you also don't want to go into the playoffs being super flat and not clicking on all cylinders. I have no idea what to make of this.
I'll say this, and this is always my rule of thumb when it comes to baseball, because there are so many games. It is a long season. There are so many ebbs and flows. You would rather this happen now with a few weeks left in the regular season than the playoffs. So hopefully they're just trying to rest some guys. Some guys are looking towards postseason, and it's nothing too concerning. I think with how talented their lineup is, I'm not really ringing the alarm quite yet, but you also don't want to get too comfortable in mediocrity as we get here into the postseason.
So I'm trying to count right now. So they've only had the entire year, they've had 3 stretches of 4 games being lost in that span. 3 4-game losing streaks in the whole season. And one came within the first month. So
we don't really count that.
Yeah, I mean, but then after that, they decided to turn it on, and it's kind of alarming though, because the Phillies basically did this last year. They turned it on when they had to. the last month of the season, they were pretty good. And then I'm telling you, when the postseason happened, they just dominated. It wasn't even close. And I know the Braves obviously had a couple of weird instances that maybe were like one-off situations, but when you get into the postseason, all it takes is a couple of dominant starting pitching.
Yep.
And then you're over. And then all of this is not for nothing, but it's almost kind of a waste.
It remains to be seen how it will all play out. Of course, there's a few weeks left. We're going to see what happens. Hopefully they can get out of this little slump, but I'm not too concerned just yet. Something that has been a national storyline throughout college football is Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffs. And They played Colorado State in what was maybe one of the craziest, longest games over the weekend. And I think the viewership on this game was insane as well. But there's a lot of takeaways from this game, whether it was the hype leading up to it with Norvell saying, he respects others by taking off his hat and glasses, which was a shot at Deion Sanders. Yeah. Deion Sanders going on game day and saying he's making it personal. It's personal. It's personal. Then you go into this game and the players are getting hyped and they're playing dirty. And Hunter had to go to the hospital because he was dealing with something with his liver.
Lacerated spleen.
Spleen, that's what it was, lacerated spleen.
Anytime you hear lacerated followed by any other organ
it's not
a
ideal.
Good day.
No, not ideal. But the player who sent him to the hospital with that injury was getting death threats, and Deion Sanders came out and said no one should be getting death threats. They're just playing football.
Could you imagine? You're the 21-point favorite, and then now your fans are giving death threats to the opposing team.
I mean, when has Colorado State really ever been relevant?
It's been a long time. I don't remember them ever being relevant, honestly.
Colorado wins this game, and they rush the field.
Yeah.
Now, it's hard to say act like you've been there.
But you haven't.
Because it's been a minute.
Mid-90s?
It's been a minute.
Yeah.
Plus, it was probably just such a hype game. Fans were feeling it. But it's also like it's Colorado State. Let's take a step back. Let's take a step back. All right. What's on your mind today, Lee?
Oh, goodness. UGA. Schedule setting up pretty nicely for them. Got UAB this week, and then they go to Auburn. And I think that'll be the first real test. And if you can make it through that crowd, you got a real good chance to do a lot better things in the future. But I don't know, not really super inspired this week because they got UAB coming in.
Yeah.
Like, meh.
I also think it's interesting. We've always talked about their schedule not being difficult. Mm-hmm. The ones that are difficult on it, Auburn, Tennessee, Florida. Do any of those even seem as tall of a task as they did before the season started?
No. Maybe Auburn. I still don't know what they are, but Florida and Tennessee, not really.
I'm with you. I don't think those are as hard tasks as you think they should be, but I will say I'm not totally sold on this Georgia offense quite yet under Carson Beck. I think we will learn a lot against Auburn.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been thinking about. Is Carson Beck good enough for this team? Or does he even need to be anything extraordinary for them to succeed? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that yet.
I'll actually, before we go, I will say I actually have two thoughts on my mind right now.
Okay.
Georgia State football, Sean Elliott. Sean Elliott's got them. They're 3-0 for the first time ever in school history.
That's
incredible. And I know that doesn't sound like a big deal to a lot of people, but if you're doing something that's never been done, it is.
It's a huge deal.
And quarterback Darren Granger, he's the Conference Player of the Week. Sun Belt Conference Player of the Week. He threw for 466 yards, 3 touchdowns. I think he was 17 for 23, and he also had a touchdown on the ground. So
who they played this week? Charleston?
Charlotte.
Charlotte.
And then, that was Saturday. And then this week, now they go to Coastal Carolina, which is a big deal. It's a big game. They're starting conference play too, so
Hey,
Good
but
luck.
they're on a roll.
Good luck.
So let's see if they can keep the momentum going. All right, that will do it for this edition of Sports Tonight. Make sure to tune in through the rest of the week. For Lee Smith, I'm Bailey Burmaster. You all have a great night.